Welcome to Relative Mentality. I'm Jack,
And I'm Joe.
and we are not here to be therapists, but we are here to be family. And today we're talking about giving the language on existential dread because it's such a very tangible thing. We were just talking about this beforehand. It's so easy to pinpoint. So please, by all means, if you could first begin, what is existential dread? Because it's
With
so
a
easy to pinpoint, right?
with a definition. Please give us a definition of all existential dread. Essentially, an existential crisis involves deep questions about um, your purpose in life or about life's big questions that can cause distress, usually because it's not pinpointable and we can't get a yes or no answer. We can't get a definitive sort of answer. It can also happen as like a response to different sorts of events. So, getting married, having a breakup, losing someone, having a child, moving, changing jobs, changing careers, retirement, midlife. Thinking of a midlife crisis as just an existential crisis. So there are all these different ways that basically our brain goes, I don't know what's going to happen. And there's not a way for me to be able to figure out an answer. There's no equation for the answer. My life is changed in a way that is going to have ripples throughout my life, maybe. Or maybe there's actions that are taken by others that have ripples throughout your life. Or it can be the most classic of which is death. And sort of thinking about what is death, what happens to me after I die. It could also be like, who am I? What is my purpose in life? Am I doing it right? Yeah, am I good? Am I a good person? Are my morals there? Like all of those sorts of questions um, can lead to existential dread, which is the distress that comes from those questions. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind when we talk about a lot of different subjects, is it's not just whatever it was, whatever feeling was the initiating feeling or cause, but it is more important about how it affects us and our reaction to it. Some people might react to it and be like, yeah, say la vie, that's life, I'm fine with it. Where someone might react to it and be really distressed and dysregulated by it. So that's really what maybe is the difference between just like existential questions and existential dread.
Okay. Okay. So it's like it's so interesting because to some degree it's like the existential dread is like the the byproduct of an existential crisis or an existential question.
Yes.
Um, Fascinating.
So our brains don't love questions, or it prefers questions that it can give a binary answer to, a yes no answer to. So when we think of like our primal selves who were living in the wilderness, it was very easy to do that, to have yes, no sort of answers to things. There is a lion. I get eaten by the lion or I run from the lion so he does not eat me. Very sort of straightforward. Um, Even death, did we really have time to sit and really reflect on death 6,000 years ago the way we do now? Maybe not as much because it was happening a lot quicker, or maybe we just weren't at that sentient level of thought yet. Our primal instinct is to try to answer every question in that same way, in that sort of binary, simple, there is an answer way. However, we live in a world where that doesn't work a lot of the time anymore because our lives are a lot more complicated. It's not just about survival. It's about, I almost said thrival. That's definitely not a word.
I
it's not
mean, we
just
need to make that happen though, because trying to thrive while surviving, because like it to some degree doesn't feel like we have a choice. Like we're
right.
constantly in survival mode. So it's like, yeah, let's thrival. Let's let's thrive while
Let's
surviving. Let's thrival. Let's go.
let's thrival. So it can be as simple as if I feel anxious while I'm taking a test at school, I can't get up and like punch the teacher and run out of the room. I mean, you can, but that's not a particularly helpful or acceptable way to react. So that's one of those places where our primal instinct not really being super helpful. Another is in answering these questions. There is a thing called cognitive distortions. I'm not going to totally get into all of it, but basically, it is the way our brain answers questions that our brain has without having all of the information. So, again,
Mm.
essentially, like, is this a dangerous situation or not? Yes or no. We have to answer that question without having all of the information. But that's also the thing that leads us to mind reading. Is that person upset
Mhm.
or not? Instead of asking, I'm going to just make the assumption. And usually the assumption's not going to be positive for me. It's going to be that person's angry at me sort of reaction. So there's all these ways that cognitive distortions and our primal instincts are kind of unhelpful towards thrival, and are only really good for survival. And that comes into play with this existential dread because our brain is struggling and wants an answer. It wants a yes or no. What happens after we die? Question mark? I don't like question marks. I need an answer to that question. Thank you very much. So saying we go to heaven after we die, saying we are worm food after we die, whatever it is, having that definitive answer brings us some sort of comfort, but it's usually temporary because then our brain once again realizes I don't actually fully know that that's true. I don't
It's like
fully know that
placating a
that's okay.
toddler. Like I feel like
Yes.
where it's like, yeah, it's like, yeah, I gave you an answer. And they're like, but that wasn't, they realized that it wasn't really an answer. It was more of a non-answer just to be like, go along now.
I very much think of our brains as like little toddlers in there, like running the machine of our adult human bodies. And that's when we're at our most primal, is when we're toddlers, right? So yeah, trying to placate your brain in that way, it only works for a little while and then it goes, well, wait a second. I still have more questions, but also at the same time going, I don't like all these questions. Why? Let's find some answers for these questions. And so that discordant, that like dichotomy of it is what sort of causes the conflict within us, which causes the distress, the existential dread. Even the like, who am I in this universe and what am I doing? Well, I can say I'm Joe. I work in mental health and I'm like helping people and I'm growing my family. Okay, those are all fine answers, but what else are you doing? Like what does that mean in the bigger picture of the universe? All
Right. Is
right,
it
those sorts
enough?
of questions. Is it enough, right? How do you even quantify enough?
Mm-hmm.
We can't, but our brain wants us to. How can we um quantify morality in a lot of ways? They can be hard to. There are
Well,
some things. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say the real cynical side of me is like, yeah, because there's plenty of, godly-esque people that do very heinous things. Catholic
Absolutely.
Church. I'm just like,
That is 100% true, right? These people who, or these things that we're supposed to be able to look at and say, this is moral, this is godly, this is the right thing. And then those people don't fully align with that. Or we find out all of these terrible things about people who are in positions of power who outwardly looked like they were helping the community and really they were a predator sort of thing. So our brain sort of, again, knows like, can I trust that? Like you say, and I believe, but can I? Are you going to trust what you see, or are you going to trust what I say? Sort of moments.
Mm.
And usually what we're seeing and what people are saying don't always align perfectly. Some people do, but not all do. We've learned our primal instinct wants there to be a simple answer, but our higher level sentient being brain knows there is no such thing as answers that are that simple.
Well, and like going back to like behavior versus words, I don't know how often you heard this phrase, but I know I heard it more than once growing up. Do as I say, not as I do.
Absolutely.
And I'm just like, and then as a kid, I'm just like, well, why do you get to be special? On a very, small aspect of it when it comes to like, I have a friend who has at one point toddlers, they're now quickly growing up, and it's such a crazy thing. And I will tell you that can throw you into an existential crisis just watching small people get bigger. And I'm like, oh. So I fear for the day that I have children, and I'm like, am I doing it right? Will be the constant question that I'm sure I'll have. She'll swear by accident, and they're like, well, why do you get to? And it's like, well, because I pay taxes. Do you pay taxes? No. Once you pay taxes, then you can cuss. And it's just like, that makes I'm like, that's such a great thing to use. I'm like, yeah, yeah, no, that works. Because this will be a household that says fuck. I will not be able
Yeah.
to control it. That's just, I know who I am.
Oh
I've
no.
accepted that. Like, it might be less, but it's still gonna happen because there will be times I catch myself off guard and I'm like, fuck. And I'm like, ah, going back to the primal toddler, the black and white, that happens a lot with parents and how we grew up. If it's like, this is what you need to do to be a good person, this is what you need to do if you want to be a bad person. Obviously, you don't want to be a bad person, so don't do those things. And then as you grow up and you experience more things, you realize that the world isn't nearly as black and white as it initially was. Because also, obviously, toddlers can't really understand nuance. So I don't fault parents at all saying, this is good, this is bad, because obviously you're going to tell your kid, don't hit people. And as they get older, it's like, okay, if someone hits you first, you're not going to just stand there. You're going to hit them
Mm,
back. Still one of those things that as an adult, if someone hits me, I'm not just going to be like, oh, that's fine. If someone fucking treats me like shit, I'm not going to be like, oh, that's fine. Like, there's things that you've had to, like, I've had to learn that's just like, okay, nothing is black and white. That's okay. That's been kind of a way to help me cope with some of these more existential questions of,
mm.
and yes, that is a placation, and yes, that works only some of the time, and eventually there will need to be answers, but living in the not knowing isn't okay response has been super helpful for me, of just like, let's do some research, let's do some research to the point, but make sure that you don't go down the anxiety rabbit hole and then all of a sudden you're spiraling.
And we also live in a time, the internet is great, but also evil. And,
Yes.
we live in a time with social media and the algorithm. The
Mm.
algorithm is going to feed into your fears and anxieties. You watch one video about somebody having cancer, now your algorithm is full of people with their stories about having cancer and what that's like. Or you Google, you WebMD, like, what does this symptom mean? And now everything that's getting shown to you is about medications for that or things. So it can be hard not to spiral. It's
Mhm.
hard not to spiral just on our own, but it can also be hard not to spiral in the world we live in because there is so much information and it is given to us in a way that is targeted for us, but
Mhm.
that doesn't have the ability to say I'm targeting them for something good or I'm targeting them for something that's going to be harmful for them. Right? The
Well,
algorithm can't be altruistic and know, like, this is information that's going to help and this is information that's going to hurt. So we just get tons and tons and tons of information, and it feeds into those spirals that we maybe are already in, and now we're even further into it.
There's also the concern, obviously not just for existential crises research, but just in general, the informational bias, where it's like,
Yeah.
this article is exactly how I already feel. It's gotta be right. Versus, trying to read things that I don't necessarily agree with or whatever. The last time we talked about existential dread, perspective was mentioned a lot, and I truly think that if you have such a large overarching concern question, because existential is this very very large topic and thought, you can't have a pinpoint answer. It's gonna have to be this large overarching thought and answer and questions of answers, and like allowing that to be okay. I think you can do a lot to kind of find a lot of different answers, but having a lot of different answers for a single question could possibly be a good solution of just saying, yes, it could be this answer or this answer or this answer. And it doesn't have to be this answer. We don't, like for death, we don't know what happens after we die, because by the time we find out, it's too late. So, understanding, yes, we might be worm food. Yes, we might go to heaven or hell. Or yes, we might be born as a new person. Or if you believe in ghosts, you could be a ghost. All of those different options. And it's just like there can be potentially a sense of wonder in that. You're like, it's a choose your own
Mm-hmm.
adventure, or there's who knows what'll happen. And there's kind of a majesty in that. At least
Yeah.
that's as I'm thinking about it and feeling about it. I'm like, yeah, no, no, this actually kind of feels nice. Like having these different doors you could go through.
You see that at people, especially who are dying of like old age, right?
Hmm.
Sort of having that sort of outlook about it. This is going to be a new adventure. I'm not sure what happens next. Eh, I know that I'm at that door and that there's something else on the other side of the door. I don't know what that is. So like this is not like fun, like ooh, yay, what's gonna be on the other side of the door, but like a peacefulness with the fact that they don't necessarily know, and that it is going to be a, a surprise. I think when we're younger or we're maybe, suffering through a disease, something like that, maybe it's a little bit harder to find that peace and that openness to like what happens next. But there definitely is a way to get there for sort of all of us to accept that we can't have the answer and to find a peace in that, a peace in our inability to affect change. And it comes down to control at the end of the day too. We as humans want to be in control of mostly everything within our personal lives, and that's where we get a lot of anxiety, is because we do not have that control. And again, this is what comes up with this existential dread, is the lack of control, the lack of answers, the lack of definitiveness that allows our brain all this extra space to make assumptions and fill in the blanks, usually with scary or negative things.
It's even a known fact that the unknown can be scary. Like that's part of
Oh yeah.
like everything is that, and with the control, it's like even if this thing that's about to happen or this question itself is a scary question or a scary thing, if I know how to control it and fix it, then I can do that. And if with existential, because you can't really control or whatever, and it is such an unknown, it's like, okay, I can't fix this. Like I can't,
Yeah.
it's just gonna happen, or this question is just how it is. And yeah, my body has like an adverse reaction to not being able to control, and not because I am a controlling person. I just have had moments in my life where I have not been in control.
It's not that you're a controlling person, it's our brains. All pretty much all of our brains are that way, where they want that sense of control. We were saying the unknown is scary. That's why people stay in situations that are negative for really long times, whether that be a
Mm.
relationship or a job or just like stuck in their same small town for their whole lives and feeling miserable, whatever that is. That's because our brains don't like change. It feels scary. We'd rather have that devil we know than the devil we don't.
Mm.
And so sitting in our discomfort and living in discomfort, we are much often more willing to do than to change our lives and have a new kind of discomfort that we don't know. And so that comes into this certainly as well as, yeah, the change, the unknowing, that is all very scary. And the idea of our world changing can be really scary. So when we're talking about stuff like environmental things like global warming, or we're talking about political things, or, thinking about war, those sorts of things, it can freeze us sometimes because it is so much bigger than us and it's scary and it's just easier not to have to deal with whatever that difficult situation is. Now that we can acknowledge that, okay, I have this existential dread because there's these questions I don't know the answers to. What do I do with that information now that I have it? How does that help me challenge or deal with my existential feelings of dread or, dysregulation because of those feelings? And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. One is getting comfortable with what we don't know, which is super hard, which I think is why people are nosy. Like I feel like that's like the where some of that nosiness comes into. I see that a lot with like
Our
a
family.
lot of women. Well, I mean, I was gonna say a lot of, especially women I've known growing up, but yeah, that's our family. But like that's part of it, is that attempt for control and attempt for knowing, which doesn't necessarily always put us in the best light, that desire to know, because that's it, and that it comes off as maybe being nosy. Or a big thing, particularly here in this place and time in which we live in America in the 2020s, that we just like try not to be in anybody else's business to a certain extent. Like there's a negative connotation that comes with that, at least not actively. We're all happy to watch on social media someone
Oh yeah.
totally, their whole life implodes. But like if we actually see something happening on the street, do we actually interact with it? Do we actually have a response to it? And I think that's us sort of being frozen in the change, the action, the not knowing what to do. Even so much as like, should I call the police?
Right.
That can be a real sticking point. That's something I've dealt with a few times where I'm like, I just saw something that I don't think was right. Do I call the police? Will the police coming actually be helpful to the situation? Do I know enough about the situation to say that I know that the police are warranted to come in this? I do know that the person that would be involved with that they're Black. What does that mean for them on the west side of Chicago? Like, being caught up just being Black. So
Yeah.
there's all those questions about how we take action that can make us freeze too, because there's again all these question marks and us not wanting to do the wrong thing. None of us want to do. the wrong thing. All of us want to do the right thing. All of us want to to align with our morals. Now, those morals may vary, but we all want to align with those morals and beliefs and do things that are right within that knowledge. But what freezes us sometimes is the fear of the unknown and the fear of
Well,
not knowing what's going to happen because of it.
and I think to some degree, kind of combining those two thoughts together of the comfortable with the not the unknown, but affirming values, the nosiness, the sense of community and conversation. You can kind of be like, I am dealing with this, or I saw this, or I've experienced this, I'm thinking this. What have you done? Obviously, oftentimes, if your parents are safe people, you have those conversations as you're growing up, as you're learning how to maneuver the world. You have these conversations with your parents when they're safe. But when you're in your 30s or you're in your 20s and you're experiencing things for the first time or experiencing things that are similar but different, and you don't know if the difference is enough of a difference to have a completely different reaction or something like that, you then talk with your friends. You say, I worked with the best that I could. Is this the way that I should have handled this? And I think those types of conversations can be very productive, even not just the like say something, see something, say something situation, but the, I'm feeling this way about this political stuff. I'm feeling this way about me, about how I'm projecting myself into the world and what I'm trying to do. Are you are friend of mine? Are you having these similar thoughts? If so, how are you feeling about them? And I'm not saying that I need to get my value based off of how other people are perceiving me, because Lord knows that how I am perceived to some degree doesn't fucking matter, because the people that love how I look and how I talk and how I think and feel, they're awesome. And that's great. The people that look at me and think I'm a fucking degenerate, okay, and like I'm not, but I know who I am as a person. So
Yeah.
if you say yay, but I also think that's a great thing too about getting outside perspectives, because that also, if someone's like, you're this type of person, and I'm like, no, I'm fucking not, then all of a sudden I'm like, well, I know I'm not this person. What am I? And then that helps me kind of like maneuver how I actually feel about myself. Or if someone says, you're not fucking doing enough, and I like look and I'm like, motherfucker, I am beating sweat over here. I am
Mm,
working my ass off.
yeah.
How dare you say that I'm not doing enough? Like, there, either people will say, yes, you're doing enough. And I'm like, yes, I am. Damn, darn tootin'. Like, you're right. Or you're not doing enough. The fuck you mean I'm not doing enough? Or the
Mm,
people that I trust in my life that are like, are you okay? Because it seems like you're really not getting out of bed. And it seems like you're not really, you know, having those safe people and having the safe community and the conversations. I find that that helps kind of help navigate like compass-esque.
the world is not the same ever
Mm.
as it has been previously. Right? The world is around us is always changing. So some of the values or ideals that we may have learned growing up in the 1990s might not be relevant, might be outdated, might just be like things that we've realized that doesn't make any sense, or even the science is different. Pluto was still a planet.
Still is I don't give a fuck what they say. I am
Pluto,
Team Pluto all day.
Pluto was a planet when we learned, and now Pluto's not. And but that's not just like us thinking about things that were held to be true when our parents were kids, like cigarettes. Like, yeah, have a
Mm-hmm.
cigarette. It's fine. It's not going to hurt anybody. It'll make you feel better. Everybody should have a cigarette. That was my old tiny voice. Um, versus now where we know, yeah, cigarettes are really bad for you and bad for your health. Or like the radium girls, right? So where they painted the watches with the radioactive materials, and then they like did their makeup with it and stuff because they're like, it's safe. And then all of them died. So there's there is a certain amount of what I understand to be true, or what I learned was true, might not fit into the current world. I know that especially with like language. There are words that I use that I only use amongst friends that I wouldn't use in polite company because I understand that it's not polite language. I understand that that's not like that it's not necessarily coming from me in the negative way.
I mean, I refer often to people, to women that I know as bitches.
Oh yeah, my
I am
bitches all
not
the time.
right, but it's not a derogatory thing. I'm like, sup, bitch.
I'm like I'm all about taking the power back with words,
Mhm.
like taking back words. I've gotten into fights with like my grad school professors about this sort of thing. Like I think language has the power that we give it. So yeah, my bitches all the time. Bitch is a word that I use. I remember when I was in sixth grade, I had a necklace that said bitch on it.
How did you get
This
away
is
with
like
that
a
with your mother? Like, that's my thing.
I think she basically knew like it wasn't worth the fight. I think it was one of those
Wild.
things where she was like,
Wild.
it is not worth the fight at all.
That's
Because that
amazing.
sixth grade, I was getting into those middle school years where she really had to start thinking about like, is it worth everything that's going to happen to try to tell Joellen she can't do this
That's
or
amazing.
that. But so yeah, bitch is one of those exactly is one of those words where I use it very flippantly and talk about my friends. My bestie is my best bitch. Like she's my ride or die. Like that's what it is. But so there are things like that, ways we use language, other things that, yeah, have changed in our lifetime. And I recognize I can't just walk up to, a young girl that I don't, or a young person that I don't really know and be like, hey, bitch, because they might not be comfortable with that or what kind of context that comes out versus all of us who were in the early 2000s. And I think it was like, bitch-tastic all the time. So the point is, the world around us changes, but the
Hmm.
things that the primal parts of ourselves and that early programming, that's still there, even if it doesn't necessarily function great in the rules of the new world, um, sort of that we are now living in. So we also have to understand that piece of why sometimes there's a, a discordance between who we are and what's happening around us. This is not the world that baby boomers were born into. This isn't the world we're no, not nearly that old. This is not the world that we were born into. And even like Gen Z kids, like this is barely the world that they were born into. So understanding how that also affects our existential thoughts and feelings and feeling overwhelmed or feeling that discordance. And I think a lot of existential dread stuff is a discordance between what we know to be true and the answers that our brain is filling in the blanks with, I guess.
Mm.
But it's also about values. We talked about this a little bit, but you know, I know that calling calling my friend a bitch or um, you know, using language that I wouldn't, again, not for polite company, it's just like friend language. I also know that that is coming from a place that still aligns with my morals,
Hmm.
right? It's not me going up to someone and being like, you're a bitch and I hate you, right? Like that, I don't even know that that's where I would go if I was really upset with someone. So I know it still aligns with my morals and my values. And that's part of what we have to affirm for ourselves when we're thinking about this existential stuff as well. What do I really believe in? What's important to me? And does that mean I really need the answers to some of these questions? For instance, what's my purpose? What is death and what happens next? Okay, my values are about helping people raise up, being the change I want to see in the world, leaving this place a better place than where I was. Does that necessarily answer the question of what am I doing here? A little. Does that answer the question of what's going to happen after I die? Not really. But if I focus on that, can I live in a positive way that is not about those answers, but about the journey, about the work that I'm doing, and about being present in the here and now, and what that experience is like for me and for those around me.
There's something that you said that really like clicked with me of like a do you really need to know?
Mm,
And I was like, because again, especially with like the values aspect, I'm like, I'm pretty set on how on what I value as a person, what I value as like what I put out into the world. I do understand that there is a difference between intent and impact, which is something that we definitely can cover and something that's not existential dread because this is definitely that's more of a pinpoint of like
yeah.
intent versus impact is very understood. But you know, knowing who I am as a person, then being able to say, okay, so am I doing enough? Okay, well, maybe I don't. Yes, I do. I know I'm doing that. But do I need to know happens when I die? No, because ultimately it doesn't matter. I know that people who are religious are going to disagree with that aspect because they're like, no, what you do matters because then that will impact where you go when you die. And that's true, but also people that say that they're doing these great things and they're actually these very heinous people behind scenes. I know where my compass points north and what I need to do that. I'm just going to do those things, and
Yeah.
whatever happens falls to the side. Again, the fairness of life
Mm,
is something that I've dealt with recently, and I understand life isn't fair. I don't know about anyone listening, but I know I was told that a lot growing up, especially with a
mm,
sibling. You heard it for either myself or my sister all the time. Life isn't fair. I understand at the core concept that life is not fair, but then experiencing the unfairness in different ways that just gives me, but why isn't it fair? Like, why, what did I do to deserve this?
mm,
And it's like, well, you didn't do anything to deserve. Sometimes life just happens. It's like, why does life do this? And
mm,
it's like, you're never going to get that answer because, if it's, even if it is God's plan, that's where I started to lose my religion back in the day. Is, looking at everyone's like, well, it's God's plan. And I'm like, well, why the fuck does God give a 3-year-old cancer? What the fuck did that child do to get cancer? And it's
mm.
like, well, it's to teach the parents a lesson. And I'm like, then that's a shitty God. Like
I've
that's
never heard that before. That's fucked up.
I don't remember where I heard that, but that was kind of like that was how it was kind of explained to me. I'm not saying my mom was the one who told me that. It was I think it was like talking with the people in the clergy or Sunday school or
Mm,
whatever, where it was like, well then there's and I'm like, no. I was like, then your God is garbage and I don't want to subscribe. And then but then there's the loneliness that comes with getting rid of this deity that controls all. It's like, and so then when life is unfair, it's just like, well, that's just how it is. And then the 4-year-old of the why phase comes out, and I'm like, but why? And it's like, because it happens. Well, that's not good enough. Why?
mm. So again, I think that's where we really have to focus on like where we put our energy. Do we spend our
Yeah.
all our energy sitting and thinking about the whys and spiraling about the whys, I know there's a certain extent where we can't stop our automatic thoughts and feelings. They're automatic. So that initial question, you might not be able to control, but it's what we do after that initial thought, question, feeling that we do have control over. That is about who the person we are trying to be, who we are trying to be. And so I think there's an importance of moving from a place of not being good because that means we get to go to heaven necessarily, but being good or doing good because we should all be striving for good. And we should, yes, life is unfair, but is there ways that we can act to make things more equitable, to even those things out, to make it so it's not as unfair as it was in the past? Like I'm thinking like feudal lords versus like the
Mm,
serfs under them, right? Like,
definitely isn't applicable today. I'm
meh,
sorry. That's just
meh.
meh.
But like if we are looking at something and saying this is not fair, while we can recognize that shit happens and that there's going to be things that are not fair that happen, can we move from a place of fairness? Can we move from a place of equity and equality? We can't necessarily snap our fingers and change the world or affect the entire world, but we can affect our little environment. We can affect the space around us, our aura, our vibe, what we do to people, how we treat those that we see, and how we react to what's happening to people who maybe are going through something that is tangible and real and scary, even though it's not happening to us. What How can we move in a way that is understanding or supportive of those people? How do we move from a place of our beliefs, not just out of fear? If the only reason you do good stuff is because you're afraid to go to hell, I'm sorry, that's a little bit of bullshit. Like I I do things because I want good things for people. I want good things for myself, but I want good things for people. I don't want to see people suffering on earth right now. I don't want to see people living in hell right in front of my eyes. I mean, I'm not going to say I don't care what that means for me later in life, but like that is total, what happens after death is totally secondary to what I am doing and how I am living and what I'm trying to do, not just for myself but also for other people. And that's why people who are atheists, people who are in things like non-traditional churches like the Church of Satan, things like that, like these are people out here like doing really good things for people with no promise of heaven, with no promise of an afterlife where they're going to be rewarded for this stuff. And they still go out every day and work hard like that and like try to be the change and try to bring goodness into this world. And that's how you challenge yourself and your existential thoughts, is by working and trying to move from that space. Sorry, I just got a little sassy.
No, you're fine. You're fine. It reminded me when you were talking about atheists and all that. I think it was a movie, but there was a line or whatever where a person asks an atheist, well, if you don't believe in God and you don't believe in heaven and hell, then why don't you sexually assault and steal and murder as much as you want to? And the response is, I do. I do, assault and murder and steal as much as I want to, which is none at all.
Yeah.
There is no, there is no
Yeah.
fear. There is no, that's just, I don't want to do these negative things. It's interesting that we've talked about religion so much in regards to this episode and the last, but I think it's because when when you're talking about something so amorphous like existential questions and all that, that is where people often will put God in place and say, God will have the answer. And again,
Yeah.
this is not just, Caucasian sky daddy, God and Jesus,
Yeah.
but, for any religion, oftentimes it's in God's hands or God's decisions or whatever. And it's like, not directly, but it elicited something of like, everything happens for a reason. And
Right.
I'm like, no, it doesn't. Sometimes things just happen. I'm a big proponent of everything happens, period.
Full stop. Yeah.
Right, right. I'm like, nothing is guaranteed. There is sometimes shit happens. Your tire blows while you're going 80 on the freeway. Shit just happens, you know. And it's you could have hit a nail. You could have maybe not taken care of your tires like you should have. Now that one's a more direct reason. I'm not saying I know this from personal experience. I've just seen a lot driving in the roads of Atlanta. I think that like understanding what we can control, what we can act on, finding solace in that for the more ambiguous questions and topics, knowing like affirming the values but also just affirming the actions that you do.
I think the reason why religion has come up so much in this conversation about existential dread is because religion purports to have the answer to all of those existential questions.
Yes, that was what I was trying to say. I guess I just wasn't very eloquent in it, but yes, that is what I was trying to kind of
Yeah.
allude to.
It it says it has the answer to all of these questions, and then that says to our brain, "Oh, good, I can have the answer too. I don't have to think about it. There it is. It's written out. Do this. A plus B equals C. Whatever. I don't math. We can make an equation that makes sense, and religion serves you an equation and says, follow this equation, and then that's all you have to do for the rest of your life. So that's why it comes up a lot, because all of this fear, all of these crises, all of this dread, that is what originally pushed people to create religion or try to understand religion, spirituality, the world, even science, is because we had these questions and somebody was like, I gotta find an answer. I've got to find an answer, because if I don't find an answer, I don't know what I feel out of control. And whether those people are right or wrong, in some ways is up for dispute, depending on who we're talking about and what we're talking about. But that's why it's such a big part of this conversation, is because it's a sort of easy way to get the answers and to soothe your fears. And we learn that at a very young age. Turn to God, turn to the church, and all of your questions and fears and whatever's will be soothed. But I'll tell you what, someone on their deathbed, regardless of their religion, is still going to be feeling those same feelings, whether they spent their life devoted to God or not. They're still going to die, and they're still going to feel those pains, and they're still going to have to go through that situation. And that last moment of fear of, uh-oh, what's next? Or what I want us to be getting across is that it's okay to not have the answers. Having the answers doesn't necessarily solve the equation, because we still have to figure out what the actual equation is. We can spend our whole lives trying to solve for X, but like there's a limit to how much we can do that if we don't have the other pieces of the equation. So isn't it better to just, I don't know, get comfortable knowing that you don't know the answers, or just live from a place of your values and trying to be a good person and trying to make change where you can? I can't, there are things that I cannot or am not willing to do, especially if it comes to like putting my body on the line at this point. I've had enough physical issues. I sneeze wrong, I sleep wrong. Like I'm old enough that shit just wakes up all like, "Ugh," and like can't handle itself. So I know that there's like, I'm not physically ready to put myself on the line for some of those things, but how can I support other people who are? Or how can I help spread information that's going to help other people who feel like they can put more on the line or that can make change? Like I'm never going to be a politician at this point. First of all, I got too many skeletons in the closet. Like I would hate the things they would be able. I'm like, not even my kids. They'll have to disown me if they want to be politicians because I got enough skeletons in the closet. I haven't like murdered anyone, just to clarify. I haven't like done anything that was like illegal and hurt other people like
No,
that.
no literal skeletons.
No literal skeletons, but things that are definitely not PC and definitely not with the Christian conservative. So like I know I'm not going to be a politician, but that doesn't mean I can't talk to a young person who is interested in doing those things or help my kids or someone I know like try to come up with good values so that they can be the next political person to shake up the party or to really understand people's needs and be looking for those things. So trying to focus where can we take action? Like what is within our our scope? Where can we actually do things? Saying definitively what happens after we die, I can't do that. But I can talk to somebody about how to treat someone with the same respect that you would want to have. This is one of those moments where I'm like, not that there's not a lot to say, but
Mhm.
that there's sort of like we come to an impasse where
Yeah.
there's just a limit to what we can actually do. So we talked in the last episode about like personal stuff and some in this episode and we've talked about like what are the definitions of it, um and why do we want control and our primal selves and how do we overcome it. But there's a point of having to just sit with the discomfort and live with it is such a big part of it. Again, there is no actual solution, no specific action you can take 100% of the time to fight against this existential dread. And it's trying to sort of balance, when do I sit with the discomfort or where is there maybe something that I can do, but it's got to be so person by person and case by case. I can't necessarily sit here and give you a list of coping skills and be like, use these and they will 100% work, because it's not tangible like that. I'm not
Right.
saying that other coping skills, absolutely, all of the things that you use for like grounding, sensory awareness, things that you would use to be present, journaling, to sort of have a space to get out some of these feelings and emotions, talking to other people. Those things can help, especially in the moment, to lower our reaction or our distress. But they're not things that are there's they're not going to solve it.
Right. Because, and to be honest, that's the whole point of existential thoughts and crises and all that, is
Right.
there is no solving it. And within your discomfort, you need to find comfort in it because you'll continually find discomfort if that's, and like, there is a comfortability, like you said, in discomfort. The devil you know versus the devil you don't. And so, I mean, that's the whole thing, is there is nothing definitive. Unlike a lot of the topics that we've already talked about and will talk about, the questions themselves are not definitive. The actions and reactions to them are not definitive and set in stone. And so it definitely is one of those, it's kind of like going to a mattress store and trying out the mattress. You have to see which one works best for you because it's not gonna, one size does not fit all. And
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, if you've got something to say, that's why we have a comment section. So by all means, if there's something, because I mean, genuinely, if there's something that works for you that we didn't mention, or if there's something that you're struggling with and it would just want to put it out there, that you feel comfortable enough to say, look, I'm going through this, and we can either try to do a video response to it or even just in the
Right.
comments. That's community is such a big thing, and that's what we've been striving for this whole time with this podcast.
So that is why we have to do the classic, like, subscribe, comment below sort of thing. But it is also about having a space to recognize how arts our lives can simultaneously be so unique and also so much a communal experience, or an experience that all of us sort of go through. So the only way we can find those connections is by having conversations like this. And for us, the only way we can know what our listeners need to hear more of, or what could be more helpful for them, or maybe what we missed, is by getting feedback from people and people joining the conversation with us. It's very easy for you and I to just sort of go back and forth, and we kind of know each other already, and we have pretty aligned views and similar thoughts. And so it's easy to chat back and forth. But we don't want this to be an echo chamber. We want this to be a place of exploration for us. Again, this is therapy and like processing things just as much for us as it is for anyone who listens. So yes, please be part of the conversation. Join the conversation. And
But
uh
don't be a dick about it. If you're going to be adverse, be respectful in the comments, because
you
I'll
know what? Honestly, if you want to be a dick, like, that is your prerogative. It's not what I would prefer in my life, but it could be a good time to model how to react to people who are dicks and
you're
how to
right, you're right. My
respond
bad.
to those things. No, I'm with you. Like, my gut instinct is also like, don't come here if you don't got anything nice to say. Don't say anything if you don't have something nice to say. But honestly, like, say whatever you got to say, because if nothing else, it will allow us an opportunity to think. It might not change our minds, it might not change our opinions, it might not change anybody else's opinion, but at least it's it's still part of a conversation. And if you really want to come with opposing views for the conversation, that's fine, as long as you recognize that it's back and forth. It's not just you get to come and talk some, like, say mean things to us, or like, I don't know, like, pick on us because of who we are or what we look like or something like that. And we're just going to be like crying in our beds or something. We are going to discuss why, that wasn't the nicest thing, and why that's not what we're trying to do. So modeling, you know, bring
Be
your
the change you want to see
negativity.
in the
I can
world.
handle it. Be the change you want to see in the world. Exactly. Bring your negativity. I can handle it. I'm not gonna let it poison me. And hopefully I can, when people are negative, I can help them to figure out how not to poison themselves either. So, moral of the story, join the conversation. Good, bad, ugly, hard, easy, whatever it is, or just to even say, like, hey, you guys are awesome. That's fine. You can tell us how great we are. Because life is hard. Sometimes the comment section is hard. But talking about mental health should not be hard.